Hello and welcome to the Bhagavatam. We've been talking about spirituality on this channel for a long time now. And I want to bring your attention to something that is very commonplace, something you'll see a lot in most temples, churches, and mosques. You'll find people going and praying to ask God to fulfill their desires or take away the pain of their suffering. And they go to places of worship to atone for their sins and perhaps to hope to find a place in heaven. Unfortunately, much of this doesn't work because the desires that infect our consciousness are not eradicated at the root. Think about what I'm saying. The desires that infect our consciousness are not eradicated at the root. So even when we die, we're still attached to the very things that we have. Even when we get old, we still want to enjoy our senses. The things of the world still appeal to us, and therefore we want to be able to engage in owning, possessing, controlling, and in every way possible enjoying the world. And if you're busy with enjoying the world, then why in the world would you need to go anywhere else, right? You'd stay right here and keep on doing the same, life after life after life. Like weeds, even when they are cut, they pop up repeatedly, leading us down the same inescapable path of karmic entanglement. Our desires are like those weeds, leading us down this path. There is a way out, and that involves cleansing the heart. Cleansing the heart means it's a very deep idea. It means basically removing the impurities within the heart. Impurities in Sanskrit are referred to as anarthas, unwanted things. What are those impurities? Those impurities essentially arise from the idea that things of this world are mine, that I am this body, that I am this mind, I am this ego, and I'm here to control and own and possess and achieve and have and do. And as long as that's the case, the impurities have not gone. Because the impurities that we're talking about here are based on an untruth, a very deep and profound untruth. Because in fact, nothing belongs to us. Everything was given to us. The resources, the raw materials, everything was provided. What we did with it, certainly we may claim to be our own, but for how long can we hold on to it? Ultimately, we get old. Ultimately, we get diseased. Ultimately, we die. So there is no real holding on. Even the wealthiest person on earth cannot hold on to their riches. They must leave them behind when they die. So what is the way out? What is the way that is beyond these religious impulses to, ask God for stuff and to atone for our sins and, all this kind of stuff that people do? What's the way out? According to the Vedas, the way out involves cleansing the heart by chanting the names of God. This is called kirtan. Kirtan or japa. Kirtan is when it's sung and japa is when it's chanted on beads. Chanting the names of God is powerful in a way that just about nothing else is. The names of God, according to the Vedas, are none different than God. None different. So when you are chanting the name of God, it is no different than if you are in the presence of God. Now, just as when the sun comes out, it evaporates all the water. It cleanses whatever you place in its rays. In much the same way, when we chant, because we are in communion with God, the effect of that, the purifying effect of that, is palpable and life-altering. We begin to experience a change of heart. We begin to experience a softness. We begin to experience a feeling of calm. We begin to experience a sense of compassion. We begin to experience a sense of opening up to life in a way that just about nothing else could ever do. Today we're going to read the historical story of the life of Ajamila. This is from the Srimad Bhagavatam. He was a young Brahmin boy who led a pure and godly life as a child and then got corrupted when he grew up and engaged in all kinds of sinful acts. When he was dying, he was about to be dragged out of his body to reap the fruits of his bad deeds. And then something very mystical happened. So join us on this grand adventure into the ancient wisdom of the Vedas, which were revealed to us through the wisest people that ever lived on this planet. So let's begin with the story of Ajamil. Now, Ajamil's story is very interesting and very powerful. There's a lot to learn here. And what we're going to do is we're going to start, as we read into it, we're going to find many different angles from which we can learn. So let's dive in. This story begins with King Parikshit. Now, the whole Bhagavatam is about King Parikshit, and this was a king who had been told that he's going to die within a short period of time, like within 7 days. And he had called together all the great sages of that time to find out, well, what is a person supposed to do when he's going to die? How is he supposed to, how should you prepare for death? I don't know if you've ever contemplated that thought, but here it is. Parikshit, the king, is kneeling in front of this great sage, Shukadev. Shukha, or Shukadev, was a great, highly evolved soul. And gathered around were all the saintly people of that time, powerful, wise, incredible beings, highly evolved. And so the king was there with all humility, inquiring about the purpose of life. He wanted to know the meaning, the purpose, the origin, the everything that a person should be inquiring about regarding what life is all about. So King Parikshit now had a question. He's been asking a lot of questions, but this was the new one. King Parikshit asked the great sage Sukadev Goswami, unless the living entity is freed from the infection of the material modes of nature, so the influence of material nature, unless he's freed from this contamination of being influenced by material nature. See, we don't even realize we're being influenced by the modes of nature. But if you've ever had a bad mood, if you've ever been affected by the vibes, the energy, the people, the environment, whatever else, you've been infected by the modes of material nature. The modes of material nature will act through your own mind and body. They will act through other people, circumstances, nature, and so on and so forth. So he says, how is the living entity to be freed from the infection of the material modes of nature, through which he then receives different types of bodies in which to enjoy or suffer according to the body? By following the inclinations of that body, he traverses the path called Pravriti Marg, by which one may be elevated to the heavenly planet. So if you try to do things like be good, many people say, I want to be a good human being, whatever that means, right? And no matter how good you are, no matter what kind of penance and pious activities you do, no matter how saintly you might be, at the best you will be elevated to what are called in the Vedas the heavenly planets. These are different planets with different degrees of sense enjoyment and pleasure and wonderful lifestyle and wonderful, just like when you go from the poor part of town and you go to the rich part of town, they have a different lifestyle, right? So similarly, there are different planets wherein there are more heavenly pleasures. There are also planets where there are more hellish conditions, just as we have on earth. So he's asking, normally by the different kinds of things people do, they're either elevated to these heavenly planets in their future births, or they are degraded to the more hellish planets that results from their impious activities. So he's saying, tell me how human beings may be saved for having to enter into either of these situations, because in both of them, they suffer terrible pain. You might think that if someone is in poverty or has a hellish situation, either in this earth or in some other so-called hellish planet, that that's the worst thing going on. But you know what's even worse than that? What's worse is having everything and then losing it. I've known so many people who were multimillionaires, and when the markets crashed, they couldn't handle it. They committed suicide. They didn't know how to recover from the losses and from all the shame and all of that accrued from that loss of their lifestyle. Can you imagine having millions of dollars and now you suddenly don't have money to pay for gas and you don't have any way to be able to, pay your bills? It's humiliating. And so people who get elevated to these so-called higher heavenly planets, when they lose their pious activities, that means they exhaust their good karma, then they have to return and they come right back here, right? This earth, however, is considered one of the most sacred places of all. Here, there is an equal amount of pleasure and an equal amount of suffering. You get both out here. You don't get to be attached to either one because you know the other one's coming around the corner. There's always going to be something else. If there's bad times right now, there'll be good times around the corner. And if there's good times now, there'll be bad times around the corner. Just can't avoid it. It's the nature of life. It could be as simple as getting a flat tire, or it could be as big as losing your business or your house. So it could, any number, or your health, right? So any number of things can happen. Any number of good things can happen as well. So it's just a roll of dice out here. So Shukdev, the great sage, replies, "This is my dear king. Before one's next death comes, one should undergo atonement according to the severity of one's sins." Now, he's actually testing him by making this statement. And you'll get to understand what's happening. So the king replies, he says, "One may know that sinful activity is injurious for him because he actually sees that a criminal is punished by the government and rebuked by people in general, and because he hears from scriptures and learned scholars that one is thrown into hellish conditions in the next life for committing such acts. Nevertheless, in spite of such knowledge, one is forced to commit sins again and again, even after performing acts of atonement. Therefore, what is the value of such atonement? I consider this process of repeated sinning and atoning to be useless. It is like the bathing of an elephant. You know what happens when an elephant goes out? It gets into the water and bathes itself, and it comes out and it throws a whole bunch of dirt upon itself. So he says it's like the bathing of an elephant. For an elephant cleanses itself by taking a full bath and then throws dust over its head and body as soon as it returns to the land. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but it is quite a sight. So the sage Shukdev replied, he says, "My dear king, since acts meant to neutralize impious actions will not release one from the tendency to act karmically, therefore persons who subject themselves to the rules and regulations of atonement are not at all intelligent." See, he was testing him. "Indeed, they are in the mode of darkness. Unless one is freed from the mode of ignorance, trying to counteract one action through another is useless because this will not uproot one's desires." See, desire is the root cause of all our suffering. Desire causes us to act. Action leads to karma. Karma could be good, karma could be bad. You could be doing an action that is to help others, you could be doing an action that is to hurt others. Accordingly, karma will be good or bad. You could be doing action just to survive, and that's also going to have its own karma. The point here is that either way, the desires that caused us to act haven't been eradicated. And no amount of atonement is going to eradicate them either. So he says, Thus, even though one may superficially seem pious, he will undoubtedly be prone to act impiously. Therefore, real atonement is enlightenment in perfect knowledge, Vedanta, by which one understands the supreme absolute truth. So let me read that again, because I think one needs to really remember this. Real atonement is enlightenment in perfect knowledge, Vedanta, by which one understands the supreme absolute truth. What is that supreme absolute truth? Param Satyam Dhimahi is what the Bhagavat says in the beginning, the first chapters. In the first chapter, almost the first verse. Param Satyam means the greatest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all. To know what is actual truth, to know what is actual reality, to know what is actual life, comes from knowing the absolute truth. That absolute truth is being presented here in the Bhagavatam for the welfare of all. It's a hard truth to take. It's a bitter pill to swallow, but it has such amazing wisdom. So Shukdev, the sage, continues, my dear king, if a diseased person eats the healthy food prescribed by a physician, he is gradually cured, and the infection of disease can no longer touch him. Similarly, if one follows the principles of spiritual knowledge, he gradually progresses towards liberation from material contamination. One must control the mind and senses. This is primary. This is the most fundamental thing. One must learn to control the mind and senses. And then there are other things you can do. Give charity, be truthful, clean, non-violent, follow the regulative principles, regularly chant the holy names of God. Thus one will be temporarily purified of all sins performed with his body, words, and mind. These sins are like the dried leaves of creepers beneath a bamboo tree, which may be burned by fire, although their roots remain to grow again at the first opportunity. So again, all these practices do not eradicate desire. They're helpful, they're good, they're a starting point, but they're not enough. You may cut down the entire forest, but if you haven't removed the roots of those weeds or creepers or other things that were creating an obstacle, then they'll come right back up again. He says, only a rare person who has adopted complete, unalloyed devotion to God, who is referred to in the Vedas as Krishna, the all-attractive one. So only one who has adopted complete, unalloyed devotion. Means no alloys. You know, when you have gold and there are alloys mixed in it, like you have 14 karat gold and it's alloyed, right? Or 18 karat gold, it's got alloys mixed into it. But unalloyed means nothing mixed into it, pure gold. In the same way, unalloyed devotion to God, or Krishna, can uproot the weeds of sinful actions with no possibility that they will revive, just as the sun immediately dissipates fog by its rays. The path followed by pure devotees who are well behaved and fully endowed with the best qualifications is certainly the most auspicious path in this material world. It is free from fear and it is authorized by the Vedas. So he says, don't try to concoct this path on your own. Look for those who are role models, those who are pure in heart, who are following this path, who have achieved. Just like if you want to gain wealth, you have to learn it from somebody who is already wealthy and successful and learn from them how they did it. Or if you want to learn any other art, you want to learn painting, then you want to learn from a painter. You don't want to go to a plumber to learn about painting. It doesn't help. So he says the path followed by pure devotees who have developed the best qualifications. What is the best qualification? That they have become free from fear. One who has become fearless in the face of any obstacle, in the face of anything. Such a person can only be a pure devotee, meaning a pure devotee of God, devoted to God, surrendered to God, completely having placed their hands in themselves in the hand of God. So it's a big topic, that one. So we'll take it up another time. But let's continue. As a pot containing liquor cannot be purified. So he's now not talking about a steel pot. He's talking about like a clay pot. Cannot be purified, even if it is washed in the waters of many rivers. The non-devotee, the person who is not following this path of devotion, cannot be purified by the process of atonement, even if they perform them very well. Although not having fully realized Krishna or God, persons who have even once surrendered completely unto his lotus feet and who have become attracted to his name, form, qualities, and pastimes are completely freed of all karma and all sinful reactions, for they have accepted the true method of atonement. Can you guess why it is the true method of atonement? Because it leads to the ultimate destination. Because it uproots the roots of desire. How does it uproot the roots of desire? Because on the path of devotion to God, you begin to develop love for God. And once you begin to love God, the love for all other things in this world disappears. That's the deep meaning of this. It's just like when a kid grows up, they're kids, they have toys. When they grow up, they're no longer interested in their toys. Now they want the real thing. They want a real car. They want a real house. They want a real partner, right? It's much the same way. So with that, we come to the story of Ajamil. Ajamil was very interesting. This is an actual historical story described in the Vedas, in the Srimad Bhagavatam. There was once a fallen Brahmin named Ajamil. Now, Brahmins are the priestly class in India. And unfortunately, they're supposed to be Brahmins, priests, according to their guna and karma. That is to say, their aptitude and their actions. Unfortunately, it became a hereditary thing. The son of a Brahmin would be called a Brahmin. So now that's what caused the corruption in that whole caste system. The caste system was originally started by Krishna. He says it is based on one's aptitude and one's actions, because you may have the aptitude for something, but not the actions. You don't act on it. You may have you may be doing a certain activity, but you may not have the aptitude for it, right? You want to do computers, but you don't have the aptitude for it. You want to do something, but it's not in your blood. It's not in your DNA. It's not there. And other people, they have the aptitude and they act on it, then they are successful. So that's the person. The true Brahmin is therefore one who engages in Brahminical activities. Brahminical activities are yajan, yajan, patan, patan, dan, pratigraha, which means that they engage in puja, which is serving God, teaching others how to serve God, by teaching others about God, studying the scriptures, engaging in practices themselves. It's a whole big list of things, but they have to follow that path. So now this Brahmin boy, Ajamil, he married a prostitute maidservant. He gave trouble to others by accosting them, by plundering them, and even by cheating them in gambling. This is how he earned his livelihood and maintained his wife and children. By the time he was 88 years old, he had 10 sons, the youngest of whom was a baby named Narayan. Because of the child's broken language and awkward movements, old Ajamil was very much attached to him. He took care of him and enjoyed his activities. You know how it is with a young child, especially if you've got a very charming, endearing child, especially if you're old now, you don't have the time for anything else. So that's where he was at. Now, of course, this is in a different time. You may say, oh, how does an 88-year-old have, a young baby child? Well, it's in a different time, in a different age. Consider the possibility, please. When Ajamil ate, he called the child to eat with him. When he drank, he called the child to drink with him too. All the while he kept calling the boy's name with great affection. Narayan, Narayan, Narayan. What is this Narayan? Narayan is another name of Vishnu. There are many names. God has thousands of names. Narayan is one of them. Hari, Vasudev. There's a whole mantra thing with the 1,000 names of Vishnu. So Narayan is one of those very powerful names. And here was Ajamil, this guy who was engaged in all kinds of horrific acts, now having a son who he's very fond of, and he's constantly chanting the name of Narayan. Ajamil could not understand that his own time, his time of death, was coming, and that death was upon him. When the time of death arrived, Ajamil began thinking exclusively of his son Narayan. At that time, he saw 3 strange persons with deformed bodily features. You've often heard of this. People who are dying sometimes see things, and we don't see those things, but they do. Sometimes they see wonderful things. Like when Steve Jobs was dying, he said, "Oh, it's so beautiful." Others see strange creatures. That's right. So here was Ajamil. He was seeing these creatures with strange bodily features, fierce twisted faces with ropes in their hands. They had come to take him away to the abode of Yamaraj. Yamaraj, according to the Vedas, is the god in charge of death. All these demigods, they're not God, they're not the supreme being. They are devas. Deva means demigods. That means they are living beings like you and I who have highly evolved and have now been given different responsibilities in managing the universe. So Yamaraj, Yama, is in charge of death. And what happens to people who die after they're died, what do they go? What happens to them? How do they reap their karma? And sometimes there is some punishment after death if they've been really horrible, or otherwise they just go into another body directly. So when Ajamil saw them, he was extremely bewildered. And because of attachment to his child who was playing a short distance away, Ajamil, with tears in his eyes, began to call loudly by his name, "Narayan, Narayan, Narayan," without realizing that he was chanting the holy name of God. At that moment, the representatives of Vishnu, the Vishnu Dutas, so you have the Yamadutas, the representatives of Yamaraj, the god of death, and the Vishnu Dutas, who are the representatives of Vishnu, the supreme being. The Vishnu Dutas immediately arrived when they heard the holy name of their master Vishnu from the mouth of the dying Ajamil, who had certainly chanted without offense because he had chanted in complete anxiety. The representatives of Yamaraj, the Yamadut, were snatching the soul from the core of the heart of Ajamil. But with resounding voices, the Vishnu Dutas forbade them to do so. Here's a picture of that scene. I think that'll help you understand what was going on. Right? You'll see Ajamil being dragged out of his body by the Yamadutas, and the Vishnu Dutas have arrived and they're intervening. The Yamadutas inquired, "Who are you?" Because these guys were stopping them. The Yamadutas, the representatives of Yamaraj, the god of death, said, "Who are you, sirs, that you have the audacity to challenge the jurisdiction of Yamaraj? Whose servants are you? Where have you come from? And why are you forbidding us to touch the body of Ajamil?" They described the Vishnu Dutas, they now describe them, dressed in yellow silken garments, decorated with garlands of lotuses, with attractive helmets on your heads and earrings on your ears. You appear fresh and youthful. Your 4 long arms are decorated with bows and quivers of arrows, and with swords, clubs, conch shells, discs, and lotus flowers. Your effulgence has dissipated the darkness of this place with extraordinary illumination. Who are you? The Vishnu Dutas, the representatives of Vishnu, spoke the following words in voices as deep as the sound of rumbling clouds. If you are actually servants of Yamaraj, you must explain to us the meaning of religious principles and the symptoms of irreligion. Who are the actual candidates for punishment? Are all those engaged in karmic activities punishable, or only some of them? The Yamadutas replied, that which is prescribed in the Vedas constitutes dharma. Dharma is the path for all human beings to follow, the correct duties, responsibilities in the way of a spiritual life. And the opposite of that is adharma, loosely translated as irreligion. The Vedas are none different from the Supreme Godhead, Narayan. This we have heard from Yamaraj. The sun, fire, sky, air, demigods, moon, evening, day, night, directions, water, land, and the supersoul seated in everyone's heart are all witnesses to the activities of the living entity. So in other words, the entire universe is witnessing our activities. Everyone engaged in karmic activity is to be subjected to punishment according to their sinful acts. For one who has accepted a material body, sinful action is inevitable. Therefore, all living entities within this material world are punishable. In proportion to the extent of one's pious or impious actions in this life, one must enjoy or suffer the corresponding reactions of his karma in the next. As a sleeping person acts according to the body manifest in his dreams and accepts it to be himself, so one identifies with this present body, which he acquired because of his past karma, and is unable to know his past or future. Are you getting the idea? This body we live in is a consequence of our past karma. The actions we're doing in this life are going to create our next our accumulating karma are going to create our next body. Your present life is creating your future, right? Every thought, every action, everything that you engage in is creating your future life. In this life as well as in the next. The living entity has insurmountably strong desires which cause him to transmigrate from one body to another as a human, an animal, or a demigod. When the living entity gets the body of a demigod, he is certainly very jubilant. When he gets a human body, he's always in lamentation. Oh my God, this problem, that problem. You hear people, right, all the time. And when he gets the body of an animal, he's always afraid. In all conditions, however, he's actually miserable. The foolish embodied living entity, inept at controlling his senses and mind, is forced to act according to the influence of the modes of material nature against his desires. Well, he has desires, but he doesn't desire to be unhappy, right? He doesn't desire to suffer, but that too happens. He doesn't desire to have losses, and he doesn't desire to have problems, but they come. So it's against his desire. He has desires, and then there are things that are happening against his desires. It's like you're in a tug of war with life. He is like a silkworm that uses its own saliva to create a cocoon and then becomes trapped in it with no possibility of getting out. The living entity traps himself in a network of his own karmic activities and then can find no way to release himself. Thus, he is always bewildered, and repeatedly he dies. But if in the human form of life he is taught how to associate with the Supreme Godhead or his devotee, this position can be overcome. In the beginning of his life, Ajamila studied all the Vedas. He was a reservoir of good character, good conduct, and good qualities. Firmly established in executing all the Vedic injunctions, he was very mild and gentle, and he kept his mind and senses under control. Furthermore, he was always truthful. He knew how to chant the Vedic mantras, and he was very pure. Ajamila was very respectful to his spiritual master, guests, and the elderly members of his household. Indeed, he was free from false prestige. He was upright, benevolent to all living entities, and well-behaved. He would never speak nonsense or envy anyone. So, in other words, he was an ideal person, right? In so many ways, just a really good human being. Once, following the order of his father, Ajamil went to the forest to collect fruit and flowers for puja or worship. On the way home, he came upon a man who was embracing and kissing a prostitute. Now, by the way, this was not commonplace in that culture, in that time. It might be in today's time, but not then. So anyway, he came across a man who was embracing and kissing a prostitute. The man was smiling, singing, and enjoying as if this were proper behavior. Both of them were drunk. The prostitute's eyes were rolling in intoxication, and her dress had become loose. When Ajamil saw her, the dormant, lusty desires in his heart awakened, and he fell under their control. A lot of people say, they find somebody attractive. There's chemistry, there's desire. But chemistry very rarely leads to good relationships. I don't know if you figured it out by now, because it arises from lust. It arises from a desire to enjoy this other person. At that point, when there is lust, there's no clear thinking. You're not really looking to understand the qualities of this person. You're not really looking to understand their character. You're not really looking to know their values. You're just besotted with lust. And when that happens, sure, you'll have some great sex, but it doesn't mean that you're going to necessarily find a great partner. It's not an indicator for true relationship, love, or partnership. Anyways, Ajamil was besotted with lusty desire in his heart, and he fell under the control of those desires. With the help of his intellect, he tried to control his lusty desires, but because of the force of Cupid within his heart, he failed to control his mind. Thereafter, he lost all good sense. He always thought of the prostitute. He became like obsessed. And within a short time, he took her as a servant in his house. He began spending whatever money he had inherited from his father to satisfy her with various material presentations so that she would remain pleased with him. He gave up all his Brahminical activities to satisfy her. He even abandoned his very beautiful young wife. He began to make money by any means to maintain the prostitute's sons and daughters. By any means means literally any means. It was like he would steal, he would rob. I'm sorry, that's the same thing. But he would do any kind of criminal activity to earn a quick buck, as they say. He irresponsibly spent his long lifetime transgressing all the rules and regulations of the scriptures, living extravagantly, eating and drinking and enjoying himself. And thus he became filled with and addicted to forbidden activities. He did not undergo atonement. Therefore, because of his sinful life, we must take him. The Yamadutas, the representatives of Yamaraj who are wanting to take him now, must take him to the presence of Yamaraj, where to the extent of his sinful acts he will be punished and thus purified. So there's no idea of being in hell forever or something. But if someone's really engaged in some really bad stuff, there needs to be some punishment and purification. And then hopefully they'll come back in the next life and be given another chance to be able to rectify themselves. Maybe they won't. The servants of Vishnu, on the other hand, are very expert in logic and argument. Upon hearing the statements of the Yamadutas, they replied as follows: how painful it is that those in charge of maintaining the religious principles are needlessly punishing a sinless, unpunishable person. When they heard this statement, they're like, what are you talking about? They couldn't believe that they would be, this guy who'd done all kinds of bad things in his life was being referred to as a sinless, unpunishable person. It was like, what are you talking about, man? Ajamila had already atoned for all his sinful actions, they said. The Vishnu Dutas, now the servants of Vishnu. He has already atoned for all his sinful actions. Indeed, he has atoned not only for sins performed in one life, but for those performed in millions of lives. For in a helpless condition, he chanted the holy name of Narayan. Even though he did not chant purely, he chanted without offense, and therefore he is now pure and eligible for liberation. Even previously, while eating and at other times, this Ajamil would call his son, saying, "My dear Narayan, please come here." Although calling the name of his son, he nevertheless uttered the 4 syllables Na, Ra, Ya, Na. Simply by chanting the name of Narayan in this way, he sufficiently atoned for sinful reactions of millions of lives. The chanting of the holy name of Vishnu is the best process of atonement for a thief of gold or other valuables, for a drunkard, for one who betrays a friend or relative, for one who kills a Brahmin, for one who indulges in sex with the wife of his guru or other superior. It is also the best method of atonement for one who murders women, the king or his father, for one who slaughters cows, and for all other sinful men and women. Simply by chanting the holy name of Vishnu, such sinful persons may attract the attention of the Supreme Lord, and who therefore considers, because this person has chanted my name, my duty is to give him protection. That's right. The ritualistic ceremonies of atonement recommended in the scriptures are insufficient to cleanse the heart, because after atonement, one's mind again runs after material activities. Consequently, for one who wants liberation from karmic and sinful reactions, the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra, or the glorification of the name, form, and pastimes of God, is recommended as the most perfect process of atonement, because such chanting eradicates the heart or the dirt from one's heart completely. At the time of death, this Ajamil helplessly and very loudly chanted the holy name Narayan, Narayan, Narayan. That chanting alone has already freed him from the reactions of all sinful life. One who chants the holy name of God is immediately freed from the reactions of unlimited sins, even if he chants indirectly, jokingly, for musical entertainment, or even neglectfully. This is accepted by all the learned scholars of the Vedas. If one chants the holy name of Narayan or Hari or Vishnu or Krishna and then dies because of an accidental misfortune, such as falling from the top of a house, slipping and suffering broken bones while traveling on the road, being bitten by a serpent, being affected with pain and high fever, or being injured by a weapon, one is immediately absolved from having to enter hellish life, even though he may have engaged in all kinds of bad deeds during his life. As a fire burns dry grass to ashes, so also the holy name of the Supreme Being, whether chanted knowingly or unknowingly, burns to ashes without fail all the reactions of one's sinful activities. If a person unaware of the effective potency of a certain medicine takes that medicine or is forced to take it, it will act even without his knowledge, because its potency does not depend on the patient's understanding. Similarly, even though one does not know the value of chanting the holy name of God, if one chants knowingly or unknowingly, the chanting will be very effective. I've seen a lot of times devotees will go out and chant the Hare Krishna mantra on the streets, and people sometimes mock them, and sometimes they just sing along in a fun way. And sometimes they're high, and sometimes they're hateful, and sometimes they're obnoxious. As a monk, I've seen and experienced all of this when I was younger. And in those days, I saw the reactions people had. But whoever and however they came in touch with that name, they got purified. Now, of course, if on getting purified, if you continue doing the same deeds and the same actions, you'll continue to get contaminated with karma and with sinful acts. So it's not the end of the story. You've got to keep chanting. But this is the medicine. It is said in this age of Kali, this age of quarrel, hypocrisy, and dissension, that this is the remedy. Kaler dose nidhe rajan asti eko mahan guna. That there is one good thing in this time. A lot of things are bad in this time. But there is one good thing. Asti eko mahan guna. Kirtanad eva krishnasya mukta sangha param vrajet. That simply by chanting the name of Krishna, one will get mukti, liberation from this world, from all karma, from all desire, and will ultimately be freed to go back home to God. So the representatives of Vishnu then released Ajamil from the bondage of the Yamadutas and saved him from imminent death. The servants of Yamaraj then went to Yamaraj and explained to him everything that had happened. We'll talk about that next week. The Brahmin Ajamil, now free from fear, came to his senses and immediately offered obeisances to the Vishnu Dutas, the messengers of Vishnu, the servants of Vishnu, by bowing his head at their feet. He was extremely pleased by their presence, for he had seen them save his life from the hands of the servants of Yamaraj. He began to wonder, was this a dream I saw? It's because they disappeared then, right? So then he began to wonder, was this a dream that I saw, or was it a reality? I saw fearsome men with ropes in their hands coming to arrest me and drag me away. Where have they gone? And where are those 4 very beautiful, liberated persons who released me from arrest and saved me from being dragged down to the hellish regions? I am certainly most abominable and unfortunate to have merged in an ocean of sinful activities. But nevertheless, because of my previous spiritual activities, they rescued me and allowed me to see them. I feel exceedingly grateful and happy because of their visit. Having heard about the glorification of the name, fame, qualities, and pastimes of the Supreme Godhead, Ajamil decided to change his ways and became a perfectly pure devotee of God. He regretted his past sinful activities and said, "All condemnation upon me. I acted so sinfully that I degraded my family tradition. Indeed, I gave up my chaste and beautiful young wife to have sexual intercourse with a fallen prostitute, accustomed to drinking wine. All condemnation upon me. My father and mother were old and had no other son or friend to look after them. Because I did not take care of them, they lived with great difficulty. Alas, like an abominable man, I ungratefully left them in that condition." So he's starting to have so many regrets now. And that's okay. It is said, if you want to really spiritually advance, see your own flaws. Meditate on them. I don't mean let yourself get sucked into feeling like a victim or pathetic or, any of that. But meditate on what your flaws are and look at only the good qualities of others. Focus on the good qualities of others and focus on your own flaws. And by doing that, you'll find that you can develop a certain quality of humility. Now, see, it depends on how you do it. You can take that very same focus on your flaws, and you can beat yourself up for it, and you can make yourself feel like crap. That's not the idea. Take it and turn it into prayer. Take your flaws and let them turn into tears of helplessness. Let them turn into a call to the divine, to God. Help me. I'm unable to overcome these flaws. Only you can purify me. Only you can cleanse me. Only you can release me from all of this. I surrender unto you. I place myself in your hands. I know that whatever you do, whatever situations you put me in, will be for my best. That's the kind of prayer of surrender that will help you. And it actually works. It's so amazing. So he was having this regret and he started saying, I'm such a sinful person, but since I have now gotten this opportunity, because he was given a second lease of life, because I have now gotten this opportunity, I must completely control my mind, life, and senses and always engaged in bhakti, in devotion to God, so that I may not fall again into the deep darkness and ignorance of material life. Being a most fallen soul, I was victimized by the illusory energy known as Maya. And I had become like a dancing dog led around by a woman's hand. Now I shall give up all lusty desires and free myself from this illusion. I shall become a merciful, well-wishing friend to all living entities and always absorb myself in loving God or in Krishna consciousness. I shall not fall victim again to the false lures of material sense gratification. You see, he's taking a decision. He's making a commitment. He is almost like taking a vow. From here on, this is what I'm going to do. And that's something where you stick to your word now. You just do it. And that's the level of and power with which he's speaking. And when any of us does that, you'll find great things happen, great changes happen, great things happen in your life. Now that I have become fixed in the absolute truth, henceforward I shall not identify with the body. I shall give up the false conception of I and mine and fix my mind on the lotus feet of Krishna. Ajamil then went to Haridwar, which is up in the Himalayas. He lived at a Vishnu temple where he practiced bhakti yoga. He controlled his senses and fully applied his mind to the service of God. He detached his mind from the process of sense gratification and became fully absorbed in thinking of the form of the Lord, chanting his name, meditating on the form. That's how you purify yourself. Once again, as his life came to an end, he saw the same 4 Vishnu Dutas who had come to him earlier. He bowed to them and gave up his body on the bank of the Ganges River. He then regained his original spiritual body. So we all have a spiritual form. It's now covered by this body-mind organism and by the subtle body. This is the gross body, and then there is the subtle body, mind, intellect, and ego. But once all of that is gone, this physical body and the subtle body, what remains is the original spiritual body. It is that spiritual body that we all have, that spiritual form that we all have. It is with that he now accompanied the representatives of Vishnu and boarded an airplane that they had come in, made of gold. Then, passing through the celestial airways, he went directly to the abode of Vishnu, or God. And here's a picture of that scene. Now, if you'd like to be able to chant and purify yourself, if you'd like to be able to have the chance to be able to do that, here's the mantra that I have chanted for the last 40 years and seen it purify my heart and soul and consciousness. It's called Hare Krishna. It has 3 words in it, Hare, Krishna, and Rama. The word Hare refers to Krishna's beloved Radha, his Haladini Shakti, internal potency, the feminine aspect of Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And there's a picture of Krishna with the deer and the cows. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So chant this mantra. Chant it wherever you are. Chant it as much as you can. For a few minutes a day, a few hours a day, as much as you can. And you will see the effects for yourself. There's lots of musical kirtan where they chant the Maha Mantra, the great mantra, the Maha Mantra, Maha, M-A-H-A, mantra. You'll find them everywhere on YouTube Music as well as on Apple Music, Spotify, everywhere. You'll find kirtan, Kirtan. And if that kirtan has the Hare Krishna mantra in it, the main thing to do is to sing along. Don't just listen. It's not just that kind of music. It's where you sing along, right? So Ajamil, just to sum it up, was a Brahmin who, because of his bad association, had given up all his good behavior and religious principles. Becoming most fallen, he stole, drank, and performed most abominable acts. However, by chanting of the holy name Narayan, he received freedom from material bondage. This very confidential historical narration has the potency to vanquish all karmic and sinful reactions. One who hears or describes it with faith and devotion is no longer doomed to hellish life. And hellish life means normal human life as well. It's pretty hellish. Regardless of his having a material body and regardless of how sinful he may have been. Indeed, the Yamadutas who carry out the orders of Yamaraj do not approach him even to see him. After giving up his body, he returns home, back to Godhead, back to the kingdom of God, where he is very respectfully received and worshipped. While suffering at the time of death, Ajamil chanted the holy name of the Lord. And although the chanting was directed toward his son, he nevertheless returned back home, back to Godhead. Therefore, if one faithfully and inoffensively chants the name of God, there is no doubt that he will return to Godhead. So it's been a very interesting reading, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did putting it together. And if there are any questions, if there's anyone here that would like to ask something, I know today's meeting was at the unregular time. We normally meet on Tuesdays, and today was on a Monday. So for those of you that missed it, I hope you'll watch the recording. And if there is anyone still here, I'd love to hear your thoughts and your opinions. Oh, we have some folks here. Lovely. What is the difference between Krishna's world of joyful pastimes and enjoyment? What is the difference of Krishna's world of joyful pastimes and enjoyments we partake here? Are the desire of such the same? If so, why is one considered free of attachment, the other not? Okay. It's a deep and powerful question. Thank you, Silly. Look, to enjoy is natural for us. We are meant to enjoy. It is built into our DNA. But what is happening is this: we're trying to enjoy separate from the source or God from which we came. Everything here belongs to God. So imagine someone who's come into your house, right? They've come as a visitor to your house. You welcome them. But now, as you've stepped out, they're starting to eat up all your food, use all your things, make a mess of it, claim it on their own, walk away with stuff, take away things. Oh no, that's not okay. This is your house. This world doesn't belong to us. I don't own anything in this world. I might have it for a little while. But I'm a caretaker. I'm a caretaker of the house I live in. I'm a caretaker of the people who are in my life, my child, my partner. Everything that I have belongs to God. And everything I have needs to be for the pleasure of God. So when we are giving pleasure to God, when we are doing things for God, we're also enjoying those things. So let me give you a practical example. I'm cooking some food. I could just take that food and eat it, and that's about it. Or I could take that food and make it as an offering to God and say, I want to make this with love and devotion for you. And then after having offered it to God, I can also enjoy the same food. Now we're doing it together. It's like when someone comes to your house, they cook you a lovely meal, and then you sit together and you enjoy it. So now you're enjoying. But God is the supreme enjoyer. And everything that He has created for His enjoyment, including us. God is there, is known as Purusha. Purusha in Sanskrit means the enjoyer. And everything else, the entire creation, including us, is Prakriti. We are to be enjoyed. We are therefore all considered feminine, and God is considered the only masculine. If you get that idea, the enjoyer and the enjoyed. And the idea is that once we're connected to God and we then start to engage in enjoying things, that enjoyment is so much more satisfying. Otherwise, the enjoyment you have in this world is momentary. You might have a great meal with some friends and it feels nice. You might have some other pleasures that you engage in and it feels nice, but it doesn't touch the soul. It doesn't purify the heart. It doesn't fulfill you at the deepest level. And I'm not saying you need to not do those things, but I am saying that when you do it with God, for God, then it has a whole different flavor. The very food that you offer to God will taste different. The very things you do as an offering to God will feel different. When you make your house into a temple that is dedicated to God, that house will feel special. You will feel like you're in a sacred space. It's a very different experience of living. And it's very practical. I find the sacred is felt within the heart, no matter the culture. Is there a universal pathway to higher worlds we take, knowingly or not, through love and devotion, only to return again? This is perplexing. Okay, so entering into higher worlds through good karma will always bring us back. That was a key message out here today. However, engaging in devotion to God, that is devoting all of yourself, your time, your body, your mind, your energy, as an offering to God, that is called devotional service. And that is what changes the heart. It softens the heart. It brings tears to the eyes. It brings ecstasy into the being. It causes your soul to come home to God here and now. And then as you leave this world, it takes you back to God. There is no point of going anywhere else. You might as well go back home, back to where we came from. Repeating the name of God seems a mode of self-hypnosis as a doorway, self-awareness, and potential springboard beyond. I adore the spiritual wisdom you share with much gratitude. It is a form of self-hypnosis. Chanting the names of God is a form of self-hypnosis. But let me tell you the beauty of self-hypnosis, because I know of hypnosis in all its different dimensions. Hypnosis is one of these things that we're all engaged in. You are being hypnotized by the television you watch, by the ads you watch, by the society you live in, by the world you're in. You're hypnotized by your mind. Either you are hypnotized unconsciously or you are going to be hypnotized consciously. For the most part, we live unconsciously, hypnotized by our surroundings without making much choice. We're just doing what we were programmed by others to do, by society, by family, by culture, whatever else, whether it's your religion or whether it's anything else. But when we take that hypnosis back into our own hands and we start to say, I am going to change the chatter that goes on in my head, instead of this negative self-talk or instead of this constantly chattering mind, I'm going to bring into my mind the name of God. I'm going to program it in so that when my mind is idle or when my mind is, got nothing else to do, it's just going to start playing the kirtan for me. Just like when you hear a song on the radio, you start playing that, and the song starts playing back in your mind. So now the names of God, which are purifying and uplifting, and which actually help us on our spiritual path, become programmed into the mind. And when that happens, we are constantly in a state of bliss. You see, you're programming yourself through a self-hypnotic process to be able to go there just by repetition. As you chant again and again and again, that's what now gets formed in your mind. And at the end of life, that's what you remember. You won't just suddenly remember the name of God at the last moment of life. When Ajamila was there, he was chanting the name of his son. You'll be chanting the name of your cat or your dog. And that might lead you to taking birth as a cat or a dog. I don't know. But if you're chanting the names of God, and if you're remembering God at the time of death, that's where you'll go. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that wherever and whatever your mind is fixed upon at the time of leaving this body, to that state you will go. Your consciousness, where is your consciousness at? That will determine where you go. And what is your where is your consciousness at means, you notice how people see their entire life as they're dying. They sort of have a recap. Now, if through your life you've been engaged in serving God, and if you've been engaged in chanting the name of God, then that's what's going to play back in the movie of your life. And that's what's going to determine where you go. So it's a science, and it's a very powerful science. But You don't need to wait till the time of death to experience it. You can experience the benefits here and now. As you begin to chant and as you do it for a little while, and it's important, as I said, to hear and then repeat. It's a um, call and response process. So as you engage in that kirtan or that japa of chanting, you will find yourself feeling very blissful. You will find that the things of the world do not affect you the way they affect most people. This has been my experience. And I encourage you to try it for yourself. No amount of intellectualizing is going to help you there. You got to do it. It's like they said in this example, you got to when you take the medicine, it works. So this is the medicine for Kali Yuga, for this age that we live in. Take the medicine and see the result. Do it for a while. Don't just do it for a day. Don't just do it for a minute. I mean, it's also good, but do it for a while and see how it works inside you, how it changes you from the inside out, as I've seen it do for me. So I can speak from that experience. All right. I think that those have been some fabulous questions. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for supporting me. And thank you for all your love and devotion. Hare Krishna. Jai Shri Krishna.